The most divisive movie of 2024 is undoubtedly Emilia Perez. Upon its Cannes premiere, the film received rave reviews from critics and has received a year-high Oscar nominations with 13, but the wider public has lambasted it for many a reason, from its poor representation of trans women to its stereotypical portrayal of Mexico and its reckless titular star who cannot not speak on social media. Written and directed by Jacques Audiard, the film stars Karla Sofia Gascon as a drug cartel boss who undergoes transgender reassignment surgery and is reborn as an activist woman for the victims of forced disappearances. Alongside her is Zoe Saldana as lawyer Rita, employed by Perez to facilitate her transition and to hide her family. Mainly her wife Jessie, played by Selena Gomez, who is increasingly frustrated at being kept in the dark about the reality of her situation. So, in this video, I have collected what I believe are all of the controversies surrounding Emilia Perez. That is both the controversies concerning what has happened in the film and what has happened after the film has been released. In this film, I'm going to try and not in this film, but in this video, I am going to try and break down every controversy that I have found. I have prepared a 3-page script that we're going to go through, and each paragraph is, okay, here's one controversy, and then I'm going to discuss it and say what I think about it, whether or not I think it's fair, what one or two parts I think are the most important of what is being discussed, and then at the end of the video, we'll discuss how I feel overall about what this film has sort of the reputation that this film has garnered for itself. I'm incredibly interested in the fallout of this film. I will start this by saying I'm not a fan of Emilia Perez. I think it's probably came in for a bit too much criticism, in my opinion, for the actual merits of the film. That's not me disregarding the worries about representation, the controversies that people have brought up about representation, AI, what Gascon has said herself, but the actual what is on screen, I don't think the film is as bad as everyone has said it is. It is unsure of what it wants to be. It consistently goes between two tones, that being a serious, grounded reality of life in Mexico and this musical. And the film really needs to pick a lane and stick with it. There are a good number of plot holes in the film that I don't enjoy. There is at least one, if maybe even two, performances that I think aren't up to scratch. The main one being Selena Gomez. I understand a lot of the criticisms that people have came across or criticising the criticisms of Selena Gomez's performance, mainly that she is meant to be a gringa, that is an American living in Mexico. Yes, she speaks Spanish, but she is originally American, or she is American-Mexican, or Mexican-American, however you prefer to say it. However, briefly responding to that, what I would say is the reason that the script brings in those elements of her being a Mexican-American is to facilitate the fact that Selena Gomez was unable to learn some of the lines, or wasn't able to learn it to a degree where the film felt comfortable using her Spanish. And so this isn't a case, in my opinion, of a script being prepared and then a director and a casting director coming across an actress or an actor and going, this person fits the script, so we're just going to put her in, and that actor will learn the script. This is an instance of a script existing, and then a director and a casting director finding an actress that they liked, but she isn't a complete fit, and as such they have changed the script to fit her needs. Now that is completely fine, but if the original script was that Emilia Perez's wife is a Mexican, are you really saying that you can't find someone that could speak better Spanish than Selena Gomez in all of Mexico, and that you couldn't find someone that was good enough to fit the portrayal of a drug cartel lord's wife in Mexico. That is just far-fetched. So I did want to respond to some of those criticisms immediately. I did want to give some of my brief thoughts on the film. I'm not going to do a review of this film. You know, the reviews are out there. You can glean what I think from what I've said, and also a lot of the reviews that have been put out there already, I probably agree with, let's say, 85 90% of what they're saying anyways. This video is going to be much more focused on giving you guys sort of a scripted and well-researched idea of what all the controversies are, in as much detail as I have been able to find and I have been able to put in a way that is still entertaining. This video is not intended to be a review. We are not here to discuss the merits and the pros and cons of this film. We are here to discuss everything that has gone into the making of this film, that has drawn it back, and that has taken people away from discussing the pros and cons of this film. It is to do with those controversies, and also to discuss the fact that critics still really like this film. We may hate it, the public, the Mexican public, and the transgender community. We all may hate it, but critics still love this film, and I think that in some sense we should at least consider why that is. Although again, I think a fair few people have already covered that, but you know, that will come in this video anyways. But anyways, let's get back to the script. Let's get back to the first controversy, let's say. To start with, the criticisms of the film itself can be broadly summarized into two categories: the film's representation of trans people and the film's representation of Mexico. In the former category, the film portrays Perez as a trans woman, abandoning her wife and children to transitioning seen as death and rebirth, and the film suggests that Perez slips back into her masculinity when she is angry. In one of the most pivotal songs of the film, Saldana sings, "Changing the body changes the soul. Changing the soul changes society." She instructs another non-transgender person on the ethics of transitioning, whilst there is no trans people present. Furthermore, this scene participates in the film's narrative that transitioning somehow absolves Emilia of her sins. She is no longer Benitez, she is now Emilia, and as a result can look upon what her other self did with horror and recoil. This is not how transitioning works, however. Transitioning is not the death of one and the birth of another. It is the affirmation of what has always been inside being allowed to blossom fully. Whilst we may have sympathy for Emilia that she has spent a lifetime hiding her true self, she also robbed many others of their lives, their futures. She robbed children of fathers, women of brothers and husbands, and men of wives and mothers. The film has no interest in actually making Emilia feel deep regret for what she did before transitioning, and therefore does not make her deserve retribution, forgiveness, or her new life. Regardless of the sympathy we may feel for her for having to hide who she really is, our sympathy for those she robbed and murdered is far greater. There are other instances of the film poorly showcasing trans existence, such as the reveal of Benitez's developing breasts being treated as a body horror reveal. But this moment about changing society is emblematic of the film's maltreatment of the so-called trans issue. It does not care about trans people outside of what they, and by they I mean everyone involved in production, stand to gain from it. If they actually cared about the reality of being transgender in Mexico, then to start with, they would have actually tackled the hard-to-hit topics, such as the fact that Mexico is one of the most dangerous places on earth for transgender women, according to the Associated Press. The spectrum for this film on transgender representation stands between two bad options. It's either stereotypical and ignorant, or just downright offensive and disrespectful. So, of course, transgender representation is going to figure quite heavily into the discussion of this film, whether it's a good representation of the transgender person themselves as an individual, whether it's a good representation of the community at large and what they think of it, and then also how does it inform people who aren't transgender on the existence of transgender people. Does it do anything that enlarges someone like me, or someone, let's say our friends, our family who don't know very much about trans people, does this film in any way enhance what those people know about trans existence? If you ask a critic what they think about Emilia Perez, then this film is great transgender representation. It showcases the struggles that she has about hiding who her true self is. She covers that up with violence. She covers that up with money and power. And even she covers that up by having a wife and kids, even though she is a woman and she doesn't want to be the father to her children. She wants to be the mother to her children. But in many ways, this film, in my opinion, is disrespectful to how a lot of trans people live their lives and what they think of the trans experience, which is that coming back to that song about changing the body changes the soul, changing the soul changes society. I think from my limited experience and my limited knowledge of the transgender existence, that just seems completely false. So to take it line by line, changing the body changes the soul. No. Changing the body changes the body. A transgender person in their soul, if you believe in the soul, that is, a transgender person has always known in their soul what they are. They're not changing their soul. They are changing their body to meet what is already in their soul. And then changing the soul changes society. Maybe that there are some people out there, maybe there are some transgender people out there who would agree that changing the soul changes society because, by having more transgender people, more people will become okay with it, more people will learn to understand and research and teach themselves maybe the error of their ways, or just teach themselves what a transgender person is. But I would assume that the large majority of transgender people actually just want to be left alone to their own devices. They don't want to be used as a tool in a political war, whether that be by the left propping them up as a pedestal or saying there is nothing wrong with these people, or they don't want to be used as a demon by the right. And I would guess that the majority of these people actually just want to be left alone. And I feel that this song, particularly when you know that the director isn't trans and the composer of all the songs isn't trans, I feel like this song is a lot more of someone coming in who doesn't understand the issues themselves and going, okay, well, what do I think about this? And I think that this woman being transgender actually is a great thing because that's how we change society. When have you say you haven't, and we'll get into this further on, but the director said, I didn't research Mexico. Okay, so did you research whether or not transgender people want to be used as a political symbol? And, again, maybe some of them do. Clearly, in this case, I think Gascon does want to be used as a political symbol. She wants to be seen as a righteous arm of justice against oppression from people like Donald Trump, let's say, or the AfD in Germany. But I don't think that's what the majority of people believe. And this is where I think that a lot of transgender people and a lot of transgender organizations are having an issue with this portrayal. So what a lot of transgender people, in my opinion, are having an issue with is that this portrayal of Emilia Perez, or as Gascon as Emilia Perez, is so rooted in stereotypes of what it means to be transgender, at least on screen. And I'll pull up one of the articles that I read on this topic just here that was written by a transgender person. Let me just find it. So here it is. The film uses trans tropes, or I should say, sorry. This is from the glad.org website, which I believe is an LGBT sort of protest site or rights campaigner site. And one of the articles on this website discusses every trans trope that Emilia Perez uses, and how this film essentially uses everyone that you can think of, according to this article at least. And I'm referring to this article because ultimately I believe this person is going to know better about the stereotypes than I do. And actually, when I read this, a lot of the things I went, oh, I didn't know that. That's an interesting point. I didn't consider it that way. So, from 1 to 6, those are trans woman killer, tragic trans woman abandons her wife and children to transition treated as a death, dead naming and misgendering at pivotal moments, trans woman described as half male / half female. So what I have an issue with in saying, okay, transgender people are political symbols with, and then using all those stereotypes or those tropes, whatever you prefer to call them, is that I believe that the film, in this sense, isn't choosing a direction on what it wants to be. Is this an absurdist sort of musical where, you know, you have this transgender woman who was a previous drug cartel killer, and then I don't really have an issue if you lean into those stereotypes because it's absurd. It's not trying to frame reality. And that's separate from the issue of the Mexican representation in this film. I'm not discussing the Mexican representation in this part. That's a separate issue. Even if this is an absurdist musical, that doesn't absolve yourself of what goes wrong in the Mexican representation part of this film. But specifically in the transgender representation, I think you can have some sort of absurdist killer. As I read in a couple articles, a film like Mrs. Doubtfire, where Robin Williams is doing drag, is absurdist, but it is okay because the film understands that it is an absurd character. Whereas in this film, Emilia Perez is grounded in reality. She has tender moments with her children where the children are trying to learn about her existence. She sets up an organization for people who have been forcibly disappeared. These aren't absurd things. These are realities either in the Mexican existence or in the trans existence. And so you don't portray Emilia Perez as this absurd character in this absurd musical. You portray her as this grounded character in an absurd concept in a musical that I frankly don't even think is that absurd. You don't really go like balls to the wall other than the famous penis to vagina song. So I think in this regard, with the transgender representation, the film very much needs to choose a lane where it's either trying to promote transgender people as this sort of political symbol, in which case you need to be a lot better and more well educated about the actual transgender existence and not rely on stereotypes to do that. Or you are trying to be absurd, you are leaning into the stereotypes, it is possibly offensive, but it's not reality, it's not realistic. You are accepting that this character is nothing more than a character. It's not a symbol of what it means to really be a transgender person. And you can portray that by your entire film being absurd. But if the character is absurd and the film is grounded, then it is just disrespectful, in my opinion. But yeah, I feel quite strongly that this section of the film, this transgender issue, or representation, I should say, I feel like this is a significant issue, and it's one that it took me maybe 2 hours of research for me to go, okay, I can see how this film is really offensive. I watched the film and I was like, okay, this is kind of offensive anyways to transgender people and to Mexicans together. But once I did some research, I was like, okay, I can see how even more so I've not understood certain things. So for example, when Emilia Perez is referred to as half he, half she, when Emilia Perez's daughter refers to her as, or she says she smells like her father. These are just like offensive concepts because, like, one, surely after like 4 years of transitioning, or actually I think it's more like 6 years of transitioning and 4 years of this child not knowing her or seeing her dad, surely that smell would disappear. Like, that just comes with the territory, I would suppose. There are other parts of this character that are wildly offensive that I think on the face you will know. So, for example, the fact that Emilia Perez's voice changes register to become lower when she is angry with her wife Jessie, and she almost slips back into masculinity. That I when I seen that, I was like, this is laughable. Because how could anyone possibly think that a transgender person is just like, oh yes, they can just sort of go back to their own voice? That's not how that works. It's years of speech therapy. It's years of, changing how your vocal cords respond. It's taking out the Adam's apple. It's all this sort of stuff that is going to change how your voice box works. It's not as simple as just going like, oh, I've got a really high-pitched voice. Oh, no, I've got a really low-pitched voice. That's not it. This isn't like a piano where you can just hit a chord at either end of the piano and you're going to hear a different sound or you're going to hear a different pitch. It doesn't work like that. That's absurd. And I also struggle with why Gascon took this film on in the first place, considering she is transgender in real life, other than my suspicion that maybe she just doesn't really care about the community and that she is using this film and her existence as a trans person to sort of prop herself up as an activist, as, someone who can fight the good fight, because that will net her an Oscar. That will net her awards and recognition, and that'll surely boost her bank balance, and that'll get her more roles in the future. But I don't want to harp on that point too much because we have no way of knowing that for sure. We can only, speculate and base that on implications that she said in interviews. But yeah, I think I've said enough on this. If you don't know enough about the issues with this film and its transgender representation, I would urge you to go and research about it, even for just 15 minutes, because very quickly you will learn the issues with this film. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that part. Let's get back to it. So that leaves us with the representation of Mexico. One of the key problems in this film is how it is blatantly obvious that the production team and cast behind the movie had no background in Mexico, had limited knowledge of the country, and as Audiard has stated publicly, there was no research into the country in order to provide accuracy and authenticity. Audiard has came out and said that the film was not intended as a realistic portrayal of Mexico. Quote, "I've never claimed that I wanted to make a realistic work. If I wanted to make a work that was particularly documented, then I would do a documentary. But then there will be no singing and dancing. You have to accept that is part of the magic here. This is an opera, not a criticism of anything about Mexico. Forgive me, Jacques, but I'm not sure how much you would want to sing about your loved one being gunned down in broad daylight." Audiard seemingly claims that the film is absurdist. However, this isn't believable. If this were true, then why is the film in so many ways grounded, dark, and dour? Why does the film start with Zoe Saldana's Rita fed up that she has to make a woman's murder look like suicide so she can win the case? Why does the film draw a line between its musical numbers and the tone of the rest of the film? The so-called penis to vagina song is absurd, but the scene revealing Benitez and his desire to transition is meant to show Rita in danger. Why, when Emilia meets her love interest, Epifania, is she planning to kill her disappeared husband who beat and raped her? If the film is meant to be an absurdist musical opera, then it fails to meet the definition. So when the film is meant to come across as camp, cheesy, and wacky, it actually comes across as inauthentic and disrespectful. Even the film's smallest inaccuracies affect this perception. In a video by Karla says, she interviews Mexicans who have seen the film, and they point out subtle discrepancies, such as the fact that the film has desert scenes, yet there is no desert in Mexico City. In another scene, Rita is seen using a photocopier at a tianguis, a traditional Mexican night market, where there would be no such technology. So, I personally think that, and I want to be very careful about how I say this. I might screw it up, but this is something that I genuinely believe, so I'm putting this out there. But I believe that with this film, the representation of Mexico and Mexicans is more of a serious issue than the representation of trans women and transgender people overall. That is not me saying that the way that the film treats transgender people is fine. It's not me saying it's not a concern or I agree with how it portrays transgender people. What I am saying is that there are enough filmmakers and young actors and actresses and writers and producers in America, in Britain, France, Germany, all these different places, and in Mexico as well, I'm sure, or at least I would hope so, and in Canada, places like that. There are enough people working in the industry and in other industries, TV, games, books, that eventually I am confident that the world will have very good transgender representation. However, Hollywood has been trying to do films about the Mexican cartels for 20, 25 years now, and it still hasn't grasped how to do it in a respectful way. It treats Mexico for all that time as a villain in the backyard of America. It doesn't treat Mexico or it doesn't treat Mexico as a country that has an endemic problem at the root of its government, its institutions, its education, even its family, let's say, because a lot of families, you'll have the dad and then the son and then the son's son all work in drugs, or they'll all be police officers, and they are corrupted, because how can you not be corrupted in this sort of situation? I'm not confident in any way that the world will eventually have good representation of the cartels and how the cartels affect Mexico and Mexicans. I am confident that even last year, even like in recent years, there have been films that have came out, particularly out of America, I would say, where the representation has been a lot better. It has been a lot more grounded in reality. It's a lot more believable, and it just, quite frankly, exists in better movies. The one that was highly praised last year was the film I Saw the TV Glow with Justice Smith and I can't remember who the other person is, but they're from Atypical. That movie is about being transgender and the idea of knowing that there is something within you that you just can't find, essentially. Or that is being essentially trapped by your external self and the need to get it out in order to live your true existence. I'm not sure there exists a film, and I should say, by the way, I Saw the TV Glow. I believe the director of that film is transgender. However, how many films exist that have been popular in America, Canada, Britain, that have shown the world this perspective of the cartels, where the world has gone like, oh no, I get it now. I get the issue that cartels are having on Mexicans. I understand it in a lot deeper way. I just don't think those films are very popular, but your popcorn are action flicks where it's every Mexican is a potential like drug cartel, like mule or whatever. They're going to be popular for time immemorial, or at least until America legalizes weed and these cartels don't have as much power anymore. But I'm not confident in any way that America or Canada or Britain or France or Germany, that any of these places will figure out the representation of America where they can look at the issue and go, oh no, I get it. And unfortunately, Mexico doesn't have very much of a global film industry where one of its filmmakers can make a film about the cartels and everyone will see it. And in fairness, there aren't many films, if any, right now about transgender representation and about the trans experience where they're mega successful. But I think we're a lot more likely to get there than we are to get authentic representation of cartels. And that's a serious problem, in my opinion, because Mexico is a developing country. I believe it would fall under the category of sort of a second world country. So it's not, poor everywhere. It's not like stricken with poverty in the same way that, let's say, a Bangladesh is. But it's not yet a superpower, and it's far from it. But now, given that a lot of companies and countries are moving their factories to Mexico, a lot of our products are going to come into a lot closer contact with drug cartels and with this issue that has seen, I believe that one of the numbers that I seen was 500,000 forced disappearances in the country. A lot of our products are getting closer to that issue, and how comfortable are we as a world about having our products that close to this problem? And quite frankly, without better representation of this issue, why would anyone care? Like, the majority of people are just gonna go, well, yeah, I know it's a thing, but like, I don't know anything about it. I haven't seen a documentary. I haven't seen a TV show. I haven't seen a film, read a book, anything like that, a podcast, YouTube video, whatever, about the cartels issue that fully makes me go like, oh no, I get it now, and I don't want to buy things that may have been associated with the cartels. Why would anyone think like that? And unfortunately, without better representation in movies, TV shows, games, books, or podcasts, YouTube videos, all these things, without better knowledge and education about these things through entertainment, how is anyone going to learn these things and really learn to care about them? So, whilst I would be slightly more confident that eventually Hollywood in particular will figure out authentic representation of trans people, I'm just not sure that it ever will with Mexico until you get more directors from Mexico who are willing to go, well, I'll do your Hollywood movie, but we're doing it in an authentic way, and if you don't like that, you can fuck off. But unfortunately, you need movie directors and writers and TV showrunners and people like that who are big enough talents that you can't turn them away because you want it to be a popcorn action flick where every Mexican is a drug cartel member. And as I say is in my write-up, ultimately, why? How's a thing? Okay, Jacques Audiard is French. If someone wrote a musical, like if a Mexican crew and cast made a musical opera about the Charlie Hebdo massacre, do you think Jacques Audiard would sit down and watch that film and go like, yeah, this is completely fine, I have no issue with this and it's not offensive in any manner? And oh yeah, by the way, none of the cast are French. They're all Mexican. Do you think that would be well received by this guy who's saying, "Oh, it's an absurdist musical opera"? I can't imagine that an issue that affected his country, he would be as what was the word I'm looking, as receptive about as he is expecting Mexicans to be receptive of. Or we just come to the crux of the issue here, which is that he's made this film and it is not for Mexicans, which is a gigantic issue if you're doing that. Because this film, whether he likes it or not, is meant to be an authentic representation of Mexico. And it is trying to be an authentic representation of transgender people as well. And yet it fails so spectacularly in both regards. So his argument that, oh, you need to just look at it like it's a comedy, I don't know why you're expecting these people who've lost some of these people. I don't know the specifics, but you can guarantee that there are people out there in Mexico who have lost entire families to cartel like massacres or disappearances, things like that. So why are you expecting those people to laugh at that or sing along to these songs about a woman who believes that she just has retribution and forgiveness immediately because she has transitioned, and I'm not outwardly a man anymore, so like what I did in my past life or what my other self did, that has nothing to do with me actually. So I can help out with forced disappearances, but I can't I can't say sorry because that wasn't me. Like, it's absurd that there is no scene in this movie where Emilia Perez does not apologize to someone and say, yeah, I'm really sorry about what I did, and I'm going to do my best to try and correct it. That scene, what I have just said to you, is entirely from my own brain. It doesn't exist in this film. So, and somehow, me saying that doesn't exist is more absurd than the absurdist musical opera that this film portends to be. If I sound really pissed off, I have to be honest. When it comes to the issue of Mexican representation, I am really pissed off because I have spent a lot of time trying to find authentic films about the drug cartel issue from Mexican studios, directors, writers, all that sort of thing, all those people, and I can't find many. I found maybe 3 or 4, but your popcorn action flicks that like, oh, here is like a stupid portrayal of this. We're not actually going to try and like discuss why this is. Yeah, they're a dime a dozen. And what reason is there for this representation issue to get better? Because there is no one in America, in Canada, in Britain, Germany, France, who gives enough of a shit that they're going to go like, yeah, I'm going to become a movie director and then make a film about the Mexican drug cartels, because that's how strongly I feel about it. And unfortunately, I don't see how that this problem is going to get fixed from within Mexico. Unfortunately, the only film that I can come up with it that is probably a more authentic portrayal of the cartel issue is Sicario, and maybe even Sicario de Soldado. And both of those films are American, and I don't think either of those films have Mexicans in the film, or at least not in a major role. And so again, like, it's even when you look at like probably the best film about the Mexican cartels, you're still going like, meh, I don't know. It's really upsetting to me because I just don't see how this is going to get better. But anyway, I've gone on for like 20 minutes about this part, so I'm sorry that this video has ended up being so long. I didn't intend it, but I genuinely got really frustrated about this. Specifically because this is a French guy saying like, oh, well, it's meant to be an opera, it's not meant to be realistic, when he's talking about Mexico. But if he was talking about France, he's not going to make a musical opera about a massacre that happened in France. If a Mexican guy made a musical absurdist opera about the Peterloo massacre, which is a thing in Britain, or about the 7/7 bombings, I'd be a bit like, what the fuck? That's a bit insane. I'd still probably watch it because I'd be morbidly curious, but like, yeah, I don't understand what this guy is expecting, and that brings us back again to the root cause of the issue, which is that this film was not made for Mexico. It's not made for Mexicans. It's made for, quite frankly, it's made for me. Because I'm meant to sit there like a fucking seal watching this on Netflix and lap it up and clap. And it's just not, even for me, I can look at it and go, yeah, this isn't authentic. But yeah, let's move on. Let's get on to the next part. The film's on-screen issues are a plague. It is difficult once one is aware of what these issues are to not see them and for it to cloud how you watch it. However, unfortunately, this plague does not end once the cameras have stopped rolling. It has seeped into post-release issues, with the film encountering issues concerning its cast as well as its use of AI. You may remember that last week I posted a video discussing the Brutalist's AI controversy. In this video, I discussed how the team behind the American epic had used an AI model called Respeecher to blend the actor's dialogue with authentic Hungarian. In Emilia Perez, the film blends the vocal performances of Gascon and composer Camille for the musical numbers. Whilst I argued that The Brutalist isn't necessarily a major issue, here, in Emilia Perez, it is a bigger issue. That's because Emilia Perez is judged on its musicality. It is, after all, a musical. If the performances aren't genuinely the performer's own, then this does feel disingenuous, and as such, Emilia Perez should be called out for its use of AI. So, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because I don't think it's one of the major issues surrounding this film. But I do think if this film is up for, the Oscar for Best Musical or Comedy, and it was up for the Golden Globe Best Musical or Comedy Award as well, which it won, it beat out films like A Real Pain and I believe Nora as well. What I have an issue with is that, let's start with The Brutalist. What I said in the video is that ultimately The Brutalist is not being judged on its Hungarian. It's not being judged on how accurate its Hungarian is. For the same reason as, like, if you watch The Lord of the Rings and you read the Lord of the Rings books, if the Orcish language isn't 100% accurate to how Tolkien describes it in the book, or how he created it for the book, or the books, sorry, you're not going to go, well, this doesn't deserve to win an award because it's not authentic to the book. However, if you watched Les Miserables and the performances were shit, you'd go like, well, yeah, it can't win Best Musical. And in this instance, the performances aren't entirely Gascon's. So, in my opinion, why should she be up for Best Actress? And why should the film be up for Best Musical when both of those awards are judged on the musicality of Gascon's performance? It is not like watching The Brutalist, where you aren't going to know what is good Hungarian or bad Hungarian, unless you are Hungarian yourself, of course. In the case of this film, you know what bad musicality sounds like. In this film, it exists in the performance of Selena Gomez, because she cannot perform these songs in Spanish. It's terrible. And even to someone who is English, I think you can tell that the Spanish is quite bad. So I do think that this film should at the very least made it aware that AI was used, which some films are starting to make people aware of now. But at the most harsh, depending on how much AI was used in these musical numbers, I think there is an argument to be made that the film shouldn't be up for Best Musical. And okay, if you want to say that, I'm not entirely sure, but maybe Gascon does 3 or 4 songs, and that doesn't include the other, let's say, hour and a half of her performance on screen. Okay, fair enough. So let's exclude the Best Actress section. Those songs are still critical to judging the musical as a musical. And I just don't think it will be fair in that sense to go, yeah, we can acknowledge you've used an actual singer who isn't credited as an actress in the movie, but we're still going to give you Best Musical. That just doesn't seem very fair to me. And I'm not well versed in musicals. I'm not even going to try to pretend that I am. But I would imagine that this is something that happens few and far between. I understand, as I discussed in the other video, that ADR is a thing. ADR is a thing that happens all the time with actors' performances. But for some reason, musical numbers feels different to me, because they are an added element that is added because you want to see a Gascon performer. You want to see Zoe Saldana perform these songs. You want to see, if you go to see Les Miserables, you want to see Hugh Jackman perform these songs. You don't care about some singer from France called Camille performing these songs. If you wanted to see that, you'll just go watch her fucking performance of these songs somewhere. I don't know. So I'm really not a fan of that, personally. But yeah, as I said, not sticking on this issue for too long. Let's head on to the next part. In the wake of the backlash by various groups, Gascon has, on numerous occasions, insisted on defending the film against critics, and as a result has drawn criticism. On one occasion, Gascon posted a photo of Guernica by Picasso and captioned it with, quote, "Can you imagine that after Picasso painted Guernica, other contemporary painters would have criticised him for not being from the Basque country, for appropriating the pain of the victims, for not reflecting reality with totally distorted figures, etc. Ridiculous, right? Tell me what cinema, what works, or what can be created. You can't make romantic films in case it upsets those who don't have a partner. Creation has no limits or borders, and even less so imagination." End quote. What Gascon fails to recognise is that her film is not being criticised because she is not Mexican. Her film is being criticised because all involved acted recklessly in the film's production. In a similar situation, Gascon was asked about the fact that some trans critics have criticised the film for its portrayal of the trans experience. In response, Gascon says, quote, "Being LGBTQ, having those labels does not remove your stupidity," end quote. The issue with this statement does not need an in-depth analysis for all of us to see why people would have an issue with this. Whilst Gascon should be attempting to bring more people, particularly Mexicans and trans people, onto her side, she instead seems insistent on being unlikable and overly defensive. So, I don't have much to add in this part on my personal thoughts, just because I feel like the majority of what I said has already been said in the previous 50 minutes of this video. I just wanted to add it because this is sort of like the first instance that I could find of Gascon being very critical on social media, and this is sort of the move from what has occurred on screen to the issues with Gascon's social media. And obviously a lot of the film, its criticism has came on social media and she has responded to it, and then people have gone out and found old tweets that she has came up with. So I thought it was important to include this anyways. But what I will say is I understand people being sort of protective of things that they have made. When people have left comments on here, or even when friends and family have, told me, like, you're doing this wrong on, like, this video, you need to, like, change that, or whatever, I have sort of, in my head, been like, oh, I didn't like that. But it is also important to hear what they are saying and go, well, is there any truth in this? And can I find a way to improve based on what they're saying? And what has been shown in what Gascon has said in these two instances, and what will continue to be true in the next paragraph that I'm about to read off, is that Gascon is incredibly self-destructive. She's incredibly defensive about what she has done, about everything she has done, quite frankly. And she just seems incapable of any self-reflection. Even, I think I have this later down as well, but even Jacques Audiard has came out and, like, apologised, at least in some sense, about the film's representation of Mexico and Mexicans. However, there just does not seem to be that at all for Gascon. And I don't want to unfairly malign her. At the end of the day, she is just an actress in this film. It is ultimately the director and the studio's jobs to make sure that they are representing everything accurately. But Gascon, from what I could find, has lived in Mexico for like 15 years. She is transgender, so she has some knowledge of both of these things, and she still went along with this film. And I understand if, like, she couldn't get what she wanted, like, changed, then backing out of her contract would have been extremely costly for what she would be entitled to earn. But she, in the efforts of authenticity, if that's what she cared about, then she could have backed out. I think she could have, like, that is always a possibility. As much as you don't want to admit it is a possibility, it is a possibility. But yeah, I don't want to stay on this too long, because once again, she goes on to say a lot worse shit in other social media posts. And yeah, we'll discuss those now. These personality traits of Gascon's, where she comes across as unlikable, offensive, and unwilling to hear another point of view, are not something new either. Tweets were dragged up where Gascon tweets about Islam, terrorist attacks, and an apparent misalignment between Western values and Islam. In these tweets, she refers to Islam as a plague that must be removed from the West. She claims that the Oscars have become an Asian Afro festival and a Black Lives Matter demonstration. These tweets have blown up and have turned the film from the Oscar frontrunner into a barren wasteland in need of a miracle to be repopulated. If there are two things that the Academy hates, it is being criticised and to be seen as unprogressive. In response to the criticisms, both Gascon and the film's team and distributor have gone into damage control. Gascon has released a statement and participated in an hour-long interview in an attempt to defend herself. In her written statement, she refers to the discussion of her tweets as a, quote, campaign of hate, end quote. She says she has received death threats. She says she has always defended minorities. She apologises for anyone who, quote, has ever felt offended, end quote. She says that if people need to, they can continue to attack her, quote, as if I were responsible for hungers and wars, end quote. This statement is, to say the least, a non-apology. Gascon never directly apologises for saying anything. She apologises that they've hurt or offended others. This is not an admission of guilt. She also does not admit that it is her tweets that has resulted in this backlash. She claims that people have targeted her and that they have done so through threats, and that, finally, she has simply made erroneous mistakes, because, in fact, she has always defended minorities. Her televised interview does not make any of this better. She says she will not renounce a nomination because she isn't a criminal. She still does not apologise for what she said. Instead, she doubles down on saying, quote, my most sincere apologies to all the people who may have felt offended by the ways I express myself in my past, in my present, and in my future, end quote. And finally defends herself against accusations of Islamophobia by saying she is friends with a Muslim woman. Whether it be the tweets themselves or her reaction to them, Gascon has proven to be categorically self-destructive and has destroyed what was an almost certain Oscars sweep. So, I think it's worth saying that Emilia Perez was set up to win basically everything. Best Picture, Best Musical, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, Best Score, all these things and other things that I'm not even considering. Instead, almost single-handedly, Gascon has turned Emilia Perez from a film that received a lot of critical support but was struggling to gain or garner public support, but nevertheless probably would have still swept the awards with, let's say 6, 7, 8 out of 13. That's a very impressive return, in my opinion. Whilst, yes, I think she can go out and criticise the lack of public support as much as she wants, and the Oscars and the Golden Globes and Netflix themselves probably won't care about her doing that. They all will care if she is maligning the Oscars for being an apparent Asian Afro festival. They'll punish her and the film for saying stuff about Islam and Muslims. And also, I should include that in one of these tweets, she posts a picture of a family where it's a woman covered up wearing, I believe it's a burqa, it's called, I might be wrong. And it's a man and his face is completely visible, and then it's their young child, and their face is not obscured either. I didn't include that in the write-up because I wasn't really sure how to, but she's incredibly, for someone who, let's say, maybe in this Spanish-speaking world, at best, I would imagine she's probably a B or C list actor. She's incredibly self-destructive. And I am trying to have sympathy in as many ways possible as I possibly can for her, because I understand that she didn't actually transition until she was in her 40s, and I have to imagine that was difficult for her. And then on another point, as I said earlier, the Associated Press does report that Mexico is one of the most dangerous places for trans women. So that's also not something that is very easy, I imagine, to sort of think about. Then there is also the general state of the world in terms of how transgender people are perceived by both left-wing and right-wing people. On the left, you're viewed almost as like being put up on a pedestal. On the right wing, you're viewed as a demon, and so you're kind of a political symbol either way. And then I think that Gascon is probably looking to Islam as a bit of a demon that she believes is encroaching on the West. And I'm not going to discuss the political validity of that sort of opinion here. But what I will say is that I have a certain amount of sympathy for someone who has probably seen like at least a few reports of LGBTQ people suffering in Islamic State countries, so places like Iran, where I can't remember the woman's name, unfortunately, but just a couple of years ago, she was killed by the Iranian secret police for not wearing her hijab correctly. Oh, well, sorry, that's not an LGBT person. But there are many instances of LGBT people in places like Iran and Saudi Arabia being locked up or being killed because of their sexuality. And I have to imagine that she's probably taken those opinions of those states and then erroneously applied them to the individuals that she sees in her community, whether that be in Spain or be in Mexico. So I'm just cutting in with a very quick addendum on this point that I'm talking about when it comes to transgender rights in Islamic countries. I didn't do enough research, unfortunately, before I discussed this topic very quickly, but what I want to say is that Iran, as far as I can tell from the internet, is the only confirmed country known to use the death penalty against LGBTQ people. There is some sort of disputed sources about whether or not it's happening in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is in control. It is also illegal in countries like Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, although in those countries it's more lenient, and countries like Saudi Arabia are attempting to change their image for the sake of tourism and getting more people in. However, until these countries properly change it around, then we shouldn't just go, oh, well, it doesn't happen there, because that's what they say. But I wanted to make sure that I was being very clear, and I'm not, applying, let's say, like what is happening in Iran, where people are being killed for being gay, for being transgender. I don't want to then take that and apply that to Saudi Arabia. I wanted to be very specific in making that point known. So, yeah, addendum over. However, regardless of what you think of those states, applying those political positions to individuals themselves just isn't fair, and you have to judge this on a person-to-person basis, not the state of Saudi Arabia says this, the state of Iran does this. So you, as someone who follows the same religion, maybe not even the same denomination, must also believe those things. So whilst I have an element of sympathy, it is also incredibly ignorant of her to say what she has said, and it is Islamophobic. There is no reality where I can say that isn't. And she should be judged, she should be criticised, and hopefully she should eventually apologise, even though I don't believe she will. I think she'll probably shut up and not have much work ever again, and she'll probably just live off of this film's success, if I'm being honest. I think what I will say is, I don't want Emilia Perez to lose at the Oscars because of the things that its star has said. Because if we're going down that route, then should we judge The Brutalist based on the fact that Adrian Brody worked with Roman Polanski on The Pianist, who is a known pedophile? And okay, well, Adrian Brody didn't say it, but he didn't, rape a child. But Adrian Brody was well aware when he took that movie on of who Polanski was, of the things that he has done. What's another example? Can we come up with another example? What about The Lord of the Rings? The Lord of the Rings received a lot of money from Harvey Weinstein. Should we just remove all of their Oscars now, like retrospectively? Good Will Hunting. In the best screenplay award, I believe it is, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck thank Harvey Weinstein personally. Should we retrospectively remove their Oscars? I don't think so. Emilia Perez, if the awards were fair, which I don't believe they entirely are, I think it is a nepotistic organisation, the Academy. But if it was fair, Emilia Perez is a bad enough movie compared to The Brutalist and Aura. Dune Part 2 is my favourite. Emilia Perez is a lot worse of a film compared to these, that it should get swept with a broom. And so I don't want the film to lose because of something that isn't its cinematic elements. I want the film to lose because it's I want the film to lose because it's a bad film. I don't want the film to lose because its star is a bit of an idiot who can't just sort of keep her mouth shut. And also, if she had just waited, first off, if those tweets exist and they exist, delete them. As soon as you're aware that this film has awards buzz, delete them, immediately, to at least cover yourself. And then if you want to go out and say those things, if you want to criticize people for not supporting the film from the trans community or from the Mexican, or from Mexico, sorry, then just wait until the awards are over, wait until you've won all the awards, and then turn around and go, actually, I fucking hate Islam, or whatever. I don't know. Don't say that. If you're watching this video, don't say that. But I'm saying she could say it. You shouldn't say it, but she could say it. And so I get a bit upset that I think this film is already lost just based on what she said. And I understand that is how awards work just in any industry. It is a popularity contest, but it's a bit unfair. But that's also why this video hasn't entirely been about the Oscars, which this video did start off with a title that was Emilia Perez should not lose over this. And I've morphed it into just being about the controversies because I didn't think the Oscars was interesting enough, in my opinion, to just go with that. But yeah, that's most of my thoughts. I've got a paragraph here or two paragraphs actually, to conclude this video. But that's pretty much all my thoughts. Thank you for watching this video. I'm going to outro this now with the couple paragraphs I've wrote to finish it. Thank you for watching this far. If you liked it, subscribe, comment, please. I know people have a lot of thoughts on this, so let me know what they are. Thank you for watching. For both Gascon and everyone else involved in the film, these tweets have derailed their awards campaign. In an interview responding to the tweets, Audiard hung Gascon out to dry by saying that he didn't want to talk to her. The film has removed her from as much of the campaigning as possible, instead focusing on Audiard, Saldana and Gomez. But this may be too little too late, as last night at the Critics' Choice Awards, Sean Baker's Anora picked up Best Picture, John Chu won Best Director for Wicked, and Demi Moore won Best Actress for The Substance. Before this controversy, Emilia Perez was expected to sweep all of these categories. In conclusion, what could have been a promising unity of social causes, with a cast and crew attempting to speak up on two different social causes, both of which are pertinent today, has ended by being heavily maligned, at a loss for awards, and with no one left to stand up for it. This, of course, is presumptive that the film does not sweep the Oscars, but it seems incredibly unlikely. Currently, Emilia Perez is on life support. Unfortunately, the only thing that could probably set it straight, its cast and crew are unwilling to give. Simply speaking, an explanation as to what they were all thinking.